What do you call a deceased Finnish man? Finished. Today, I'm going to recap a 2020 action romance film called Marlene. The film opens with Frank, a hitman employed by a Styrian underworld syndicate, notorious for his icy demeanor and relentless aggression towards adversaries. He steps out of his vehicle, ready to infiltrate a dining establishment from its rear entrance. Upon the door being opened by a man, Frank abruptly fires his weapon. Frank proceeds to infiltrate the premises, unloading his gun on the men present, all of whom seem to be part of a competitor mafia group. Having exterminated all his intended victims, Frank seizes a briefcase before heading back to his vehicle. Frank's subsequent rendezvous is with his superior, who informs him of a final task he must fulfill before he can embark on a holiday. Frank scrutinizes the dossier provided and is met with the image of a female. He vocally acknowledges his refusal to harm children or females, but his boss reassures him that his mission is not to assassinate her, but merely to abduct her. The employer divulges that the woman, Marlene, is the progeny of a competing crime lord, and their objective is to instill fear in him. Frank consents to the task, but his boss notes a perceived unease. Frank attributes his anxiety to the prior mission, where an innocent life was lost. Gathering his assigned file, Frank heads back to his vehicle. Following this, Frank begins to trace Marlene's routine. Her day includes leaving her workplace, purchasing flowers, and making a visit to a cemetery. She lays the flowers at her mother's resting place and engages in a one-sided conversation with her. She reveals the abandonment by her father and how her deceased mother was her only kin left. Later that evening, Frank trails Marlene to a nightclub where she works as a mixologist. While he observes her, two males attempt to charm her, only to be rejected immediately. They persist by offering her a beverage, but she declines, citing a lack of time. After her shift ends, Marlene plans to return home. The previously rejected males confront her, seeking vengeance for their earlier dismissal. One strikes her across the face, prompting Frank to exit his car to intervene. He retaliates against the man who assaulted Marlene and successfully drives them away. Recognizing her injuries, he proposes a ride in his car, to which she agrees. He insists on attending to her injury promptly, though he acknowledges his lack of knowledge on the matter. Marlene invites him into her home, where he manages to dress her wound. She succumbs to an emotional outpouring, but Frank, unfamiliar with emotional support, simply stays present. Eventually, she falls asleep, and he maintains a vigil beside her. Upon waking the next morning, Frank finds himself still at Marlene's place. She serves him coffee, and they engage in a conversation. As he departs, she extends an invitation for a movie date, which he accepts. A couple of days later, Frank collects Marlene in his vehicle, and they enjoy a movie together. Later that evening, they spend time outdoors, appreciating the natural world. In the course of their discussion, she discloses that her father deserted her while she was just a young girl. Furthermore, she harbors suspicions about his involvement in a criminal network, but her suspicions are unconfirmed. He, on his side, unveils that his parents perished in an automobile crash during his childhood, a painful memory he's since moved beyond. Marlene provides solace, and Frank experiences a long-forgotten sensation of love and affection. He then escorts her back to her place. She expresses gratitude for his presence and actions, culminating in a passionate kiss between them. The evening progresses with both sharing an intimate moment in bed. The following morning, Frank becomes aware of a significant change. His hand, which used to shake, has become steady since he started seeing Marlene. He steps out for a casual stroll, during which the memory of his mission, the abduction of Marlene, resurfaces. As he comprehends his developing feelings for her, he returns to Marlene's apartment, only to find the door ajar. Instinctively, he draws out his firearm, detecting an intruder's presence. Shortly, he encounters his boss's underling, Felix, who informs him that Marlene has already been abducted. A telephonic interaction with his boss follows, during which he is reprimanded for his lapse in mission focus. The boss suggests he take some time off to regain his former mindset. Felix reproaches Frank for his perceived treachery of their organization for a woman. He urges Frank to dismiss his feelings for Marlene and rejoin their ranks when he's mentally ready. At this crossroads, Frank must make a crucial decision. to abandon Marlene and refocus on his work, or to rescue her. Glancing at her photograph, he chambers a round into his weapon and sets off. Upon reaching his boss's mansion, he is informed by the guard that his entry is denied. Nevertheless, he instructs the guard to relay a message to Felix about their need for a conversation. Frank infiltrates the mansion and requests Felix to arrange a meeting with Marlene. However, his request is declined on the grounds of Marlene being preoccupied with their boss. Frank endeavors to approach the boss's office, which Felix attempts to prevent. A physical altercation ensues, in which Frank finds himself easily bested by Felix. Despite being overpowered, Frank brandishes his firearm, only to have a female assailant counter-threaten him with a katana. Frank lowers his weapon, and Felix lands another punch, proclaiming him a traitor in the eyes of the gang and expressing the boss's displeasure. Felix instructs his crew to administer severe punishment should Frank make any attempts towards the captive Marlene. Subsequently, Felix expels him from the organization, cautioning him to forget about Marlene if he wants to stay alive. Frank is then escorted off the premises by the guard. Battered and bruised, Frank seeks the assistance of an old acquaintance, a skilled hacker. His friend reluctantly allows him in, despite his wife's reservations, given her knowledge of Frank's checkered history. Frank requests his friend to establish a connection with a woman known only as the Empress. Frank admits that for the previous year, he has been under the employment of an individual who deceived him into executing innocent lives. As he uncovered this stark reality, panic attacks became frequent, and his nerves grew increasingly unsettled. He now identifies himself as a criminal, mirroring those he had once served, and expresses a desire to alter this reality. The conversation then veers towards Marlene, and Frank confesses his love for her. In his perspective, providing her with protection and assistance felt morally correct. This influenced his decision to rescind his boss's order to abduct her. Unfortunately, she has now fallen into captivity, being held at the crime boss's heavily fortified mansion, and he intends to liberate her. To infiltrate the securely guarded mansion, he needs specialized gear, prompting him to request his friend to establish contact with the Empress once more. As this exchange unfolds, the friend's wife overhears the conversation and becomes intrigued by the mention of Marlene. She insists on tending to Frank's injuries, while instructing her husband to get in touch with the Empress. The call is made, and Frank is informed of an arranged meeting with the Empress within an hour. Before his departure, the friend's wife extends an invitation for Frank and Marlene to visit them, should they emerge unscathed. Frank reaches the rendezvous location, enters a building, and is escorted to the Empress. Upon his entry, several women greet him, suggesting their familiarity with him. Shortly, a guard guides him to the Empress. He expresses his need for weaponry, although his last interaction with her resulted in the demise of 6 of her clients. On discovering his intention to assassinate his former boss, the Empress consents to assist him and leads him to the weapons depot. Frank gathers all the equipment he requires and departs. The Empress clarifies that should his motive to eliminate his prior boss be genuine, there would be no charges for the weapons and ends the encounter by wishing him luck. Subsequently, Frank heads towards the mansion, and upon reaching the parking area, he is spotted by a guard via security cameras. The guard swiftly alerts Felix about the heavily armed Frank, advancing towards the nightclub within the mansion. Frank, armed and ready, proceeds towards the club's entrance. A security officer attempts to apprehend him physically, but Frank responds with a lethal gunshot to the head. Felix instructs the remaining guards about Frank's arrival, commanding them to kill on sight if Frank resists surrendering. Upon penetrating the club's interior, a guard lunges at Frank with a knife, but Frank manages to eliminate him. As additional guards appear and open fire, a gunfight ensues, resulting in Frank taking out several henchmen. Amidst the chaos, the club's elderly bartender tries to attack Frank with a firearm, only to discover it's unloaded. The bartender attempts to flee the scene, but Frank commences pursuit. In the interim, Felix is attempting to alert a woman named Tanya about Frank's intrusion. At that time, Tanya is engrossed in a game of poker in the basement, along with other criminals. Suddenly, the terrified elderly bartender stumbles into the room and collapses onto the floor. The group erupts into laughter, but their mirth is short-lived as Frank bursts in, opening fire. Using the fallen bartender's body as a shield, Frank tosses a grenade, annihilating all the criminals in the basement. Subsequently, Felix articulates the necessity to warn the boss about Frank's relentless advance and emphasizes the urgency to halt him at all costs. A sizable group of henchmen is seen marching down a corridor, intent on intercepting Frank, who promptly retaliates with a stun grenade and systematically eliminates them. Following this, he barely dodges a knife thrown at him and sees it was hurled by Felix's girlfriend, armed with a katana. Frank informs her that he harbors no intentions of killing her and insists that he just needs to locate Marlene. Nevertheless, she is determined to confront him. A battle ensues, with Frank inflicting a wound on her leg, causing her to lose her footing. Seizing the opportunity, Frank ultimately dispatches her with the blade. Upon discovering his girlfriend's lifeless body, Felix is desolate. The guard attempts to console him, but Felix impulsively shoots him dead. Felix then addresses Frank through an intercom system, stating he had observed Frank's trembling hands during a previous mission. Consequently, Felix is convinced that he can triumph over him in a showdown. The lights are cut, and Frank cautiously navigates the corridor with his firearm. Meanwhile, Felix is advancing towards him, equipped with night vision goggles and a gun. As Frank continues, a sudden gunshot shatters the wall next to him, causing him to stagger and fall. Recovering swiftly, he scrambles outside. Felix tracks him and tosses him a weapon to commence their duel. They position themselves at a distance, ready to seize the weapon and fire. Fortunately, Frank outpaces Felix and manages to shoot him dead, striking him in the face. Subsequently, Frank locates Marlene in the office of his erstwhile boss. As he settles into a chair, he addresses the boss as father. It's revealed then that the boss is indeed Frank's biological father. Frank's mother had tragically ended her life while he was still a child. Frank's resentment towards his father is palpable, stemming from the anger that his mother hadn't waited for him to mature so they could escape together. His father contends that all his actions were for Frank's benefit, but Frank rebukes him, accusing him of exploiting him for personal gain. Frank's childhood was far from conventional. It was spent honing his skills instead of enjoying the innocence of youth like his peers. In a moment of distraction, his father attempts to seize the gun, but Frank anticipates this and shoots him. Marlene embraces Frank, who expresses his regret to her. Eventually, hand in hand, they leave the mansion together. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. It would be best if you watched the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this.